Story 1. Where I'm from, a successful businessman reported dead for years was found to be the homeless person who had been soliciting in the hospital that was built by his donation. How was he found? He was told he could not solicit at the hospital entrance anymore. He was arrested for resisting arrest, and the man still had all his money. Mental illnesses are horrible. Story 2. Larry Hillblom, who was the co-founder of DHL, had a very dark personal life, to put it mildly. He traveled to Southeast Asia many times as a sex tourist and fathered multiple children with a number of women, some of whom were under the age of consent. Hillblom died in a plane crash way back in 1995, but his body was never recovered, and it was later discovered that his home had been scrubbed clean of any possible traces of deoxyribonucleic acid. From what I remember, the sinks were allegedly washed with some kind of acid, and his toothbrush and clothes were found buried in his backyard and were useless for any forensic analysis. Even the mole that he had surgically removed from his face at one point was later revealed to have not been his, but somebody else's. I really do think he planned all of this out and is living under a new identity. Story 3. An Australian millionaire successfully faked his own death as part of an insurance fraud in 2000 and got away with it for years until a chance meeting with his brother on a street in New Zealand. Story 4. I don't know if he's super famous, but Kenneth Lay, the chief executive officer of Enron, had a heart attack in Colorado, was pronounced dead, cremated, and his ashes were spread in an undisclosed location in the mountains. This was a few months after he was found guilty in the whole Enron scandal. Story 5. I feel like most of these are joke answers, but Larry Hillblom from DHL gets my vote. He was a super creep who only raped virgin girls in Southeast Asia. The first time his plane crashed, he had massive reconstructive surgery on his face, and the second time his plane crashed, they never recovered his body. His estate paid out millions to his illegitimate children. Story 6. I got very high once and went to a synthesizer convention at a hotel next to the Burbank airport to meet up with friends to see Thomas Dolby play at the end. There was a guy there selling handmade stuff. I can't remember if it was jewelry or guitar straps or something. Anyway, he was older than me and had scars on his face like he had cystic acne a long time ago. He said he had a vitamin D deficiency because someone else was talking about it. He said he had the deficiency for several years because he never leaves his house. He didn't like the public. But he knew a lot of Los Angeles landmarks. He said he lived out near Palmdale. His voice sounded exactly like Elliott Smith. I thought about that dude for months. Story 7. Not famous until after he faked his death. John Darwin. My home village, Seaton Carew, on the northeast coast of England, had a tragedy in 2002 when a local landlord disappeared while out sea kayaking. Except he didn't. He hid in a secret room at the back of his house for several years until the insurance paid out. Only his wife was in on it. Their 2 sons thought he was dead. Eventually, he tried to set himself up in Panama, but when he realized his fake ID would not pass scrutiny, he decided to return to the United Kingdom and fake amnesia. The police quickly unraveled the deception, and he went to prison for several years. My mate's dad changed the local road sign to say, Seaton Canoe, twinned with Panama. Story 8. MF Doom. The guy who would habitually send masked imposters to perform his shows would definitely fake his own death. At least that's my own harmless conspiracy theory. Story 9. Aubrey McClendon, one of the founders of Chesapeake Energy and essentially the founder of hydraulic fracturing. His net worth was $500 million. One day prior, he had been indicted by a federal grand jury for antitrust violations. The story is he was on his way to the courthouse if you believe that in Oklahoma City when he crashed his car at 9 a.m. The car burned to the point that they couldn't identify the body. Later, they matched his dental records to confirm it was him. But again, if you believe that. For those curious, it was a single-car accident where he drove into an overpass at an excessive speed. I have close insider knowledge about Aubrey, and he was the type who would never commit suicide. He was much too proud for that. He would have rather lost all his money by saving face and then try to gain it back. Even with the rumors that he hadn't been sleeping, I don't believe a word. He was innocuous enough looking that if you weren't in the natural gas industry, you wouldn't give him a second glance. Story 10, Jim Gray. Throwaway time. What's your secret that could? Did Jim Gray fake his death and post about it on? Story 11, Falco, the Austrian musician known for Rock Me Amadeus, if you remember, once even said that he'd probably fake his own death to escape his fame. He died in a car crash in the Dominican Republic in 1998. What was curious about the accident was that the pictures of the accident were taken by one of his friends, who was a director, and they had worked together on a project some weeks prior. But it doesn't stop there, because years later, in 2004, a man was spotted at a Philharmonic event where they also played some Falco music. This man looked strikingly similar to Falco, specifically his deformed ear that he had since an accident at a bar. Story 12. I'm blanking on the guy's name, but there was a banker who had faked his own death in 1989. He had to go to New York City for a meeting and wound up in the Twin Towers on September 11th and was identified by DNA from a tooth in the rubble. Story 13. Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, and possibly Jeffrey Epstein's introducer to the Israeli intelligence agency. Wanted for various kinds of fraud, he went missing from his yacht, was found at sea supposedly, and was quickly buried. Do not believe it. Story 14. There's a non-zero chance Michael Rockefeller just decided to give up his life and go live a simpler one somewhere in New Guinea or Indonesia. I know a group of villagers said they ate him or whatever, but that also seems like the type of thing he'd just tell them to say if anyone asked. Story 15. I guess enough time has gone by that people don't think that anymore. But in the early 2000s, it was a common internet rumor, with people talking about the number 7 and stuff, saying he would come back in 2003, etc. The fact they released his posthumous works under the name Machiavelli didn't help matters, since Machiavelli famously advocated for faking your own death. I was there when all the Tupac is Alive fan sites were big. Boy, I feel old now. Story 16. I kind of wondered if they really killed Bin Laden or secretly abducted him. You tell the world he is dead and buried, then no one asks questions about what you are doing with him, namely how far you are going with your enhanced interrogation techniques. Story 17. I don't think anyone famous has ever successfully faked their own death. But if I have to pick one person, Christopher Marlowe. He is one of the most dangerous men on earth with a knife. He is a spy for Her Majesty, and somehow he gets stabbed in a bar fight by his friend who also works for the royal government. And the same year Shakespeare starts getting his name out on his plays in London? Nope. He faked his own death, got baptized under the name William Shakespeare, and started a new life. Again, I don't really buy it, but it's a fun conceit. Story 18. Michael Jackson's life was so full of mystery and spectacle. What if his final act was the ultimate illusion? He was always reinventing himself, always one step ahead. Maybe he moonwalked right out of the spotlight to finally find the privacy he never had. Story 19. Jeffrey Epstein may not have single-handedly faked his death, but those he had evidence on helped him. Dead man switches would expose them if he was killed. Just my 2 cents. Story 20. I once saw a show with Tupac's friend who said Tupac's favorite story was about a prince who faked his own death and then ran things from the shadows. There's an artist today that everyone who has heard Tupac songs thinks the new songs are Tupac's, released under a different person. Story 21. My father has always insisted that Elvis is still alive. He even shows me YouTube videos of some random old guy singing and says, "Look at his mouth. Look at his teeth. Doesn't it look like Elvis?" Nope, I don't see it. Just a random old guy. My father is 86.